the release of the films.
Oh,
Amazing. Are we on live? It sounds like we're talking to each other live. Hello, sir.
hello.
Hello.
Hi. There's a song.
Hello.
Hey, everybody. Hold on. Are we talking to the people on the show now? Are we live? So, hello. I think I want to tell some. I want to say something to the audience. Welcome to the Torn Tuesday show. We didn't know that we just started, but now I realize we just started, and we're going to have an extraordinary show today, on a day that feels rather like a momentous day. It's a very noteworthy day. It is. It feels like a very energized day, does it not, to everybody? And perhaps for many, many reasons. But most of all, we're here to talk about the music and the symphonic score created by Howard Shore for the Lord of the Rings trilogy of films, which coincidentally now is enjoying its 20th anniversary of the recording of said music. It is 20 years ago that those amazing, talented musicians working with Mr. Shore and guided by the vision of Peter Jackson and his team of artists at Weta, and created something which has now outlived itself beyond terms of cinema into a whole new context in popular culture altogether. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here for a very special celebration of the music of Howard Shore and the Lord of the Rings with our special guests, Jim J. Ware and Doug Adams. Let's have a round of applause, everybody. Yay. Welcome aboard, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good to
Thank
see
you.
And how about that? We're going to celebrate together. We're going to get into some nerdy and perhaps, and quite enjoyable granular bits of discussion to learn more. Pull back the curtain a little bit and learn some things about what happened 20 years ago from, the dude who was there himself. Mr. Doug Adams has worked on, to those of you familiar with his work, on the music of The Lord of the Rings that he wrote after working so closely with Howard Shore. And now he's joined by Jim J. Ware, and they've put together music of the Hobbit trilogy, which we'll be talking about later. Such excitement in the air. Thank you both for coming to the show. Welcome. And thank you to Justin behind the scenes for putting together all this technical magic.
I'm in front of the scenes today. I wanted to talk about music.
You better bring it.
So hello everybody at home. Darlene in the chat room. Darlene Broadway says, "Love and miss you." Cliff.
That's so beautiful. Thank you, Dar. Oh my gosh. Great.
And to everybody in the chat room, happy 420. We had a little debate on Twitter whether Tolkien would approve of 420, and I don't think there's any way to get around the writing in the book. What the hobbits smoke is what everyone is smoking today.
That is not true, sir, and I must correct you. I must not so sternly correct you. Maybe I will gently chide you in front of millions of people on the interwebs today, but no, it's tobacco. And there was a linguistic choice in Professor Tolkien using the word pipeweed and not specifically using the word tobacco. And in his linguistic considerations, tobacco was far too American of a plant. It was too Americanized of a word. And it was a word that would not be appropriate in the backdrop of Arda, which was based more on his other languages and influences, not American. So tobacco was changed to pipeweed, and it is not in any way reflective of today's modern cannabis culture. But it's kind of funny how Peter Jackson got away with visually representing it in such a playful, wink, wink kind of way that people have long since adopted it. And it's the meme. It's obviously why we have the wizard.
Is this the allegory that Tolkien warned about? Or is this just applicability?
No. Neither. No, this is a linguistic choice. What we're still guilty of finding is on the last page of The Hobbit, published in 1937. The final words at the final sentence of The Hobbit is where Bilbo says, "Thank goodness," and handed him the tobacco jar. Tobacco jar is the final, hyphenated word of The Hobbit itself. But going forward with The Lord of the Rings, all those years later, Professor Tolkien reconsidered that use of the word, and he didn't want, he was a botanist. Do you know that Professor Tolkien had a vast amount of knowledge of plants? Believe it or not. It is. He did want to tell us something.
You hear that? Plants.
Listen.
He was very intimate with plants.
Look at the prologue to The Lord of the Rings. I just, just on Tolkien reading day, I did a reading of the prologue, and in that is this whole chapter about pipeweed, and Maria Doc Brandybuck having the responsibility of writing down in all of his notes and journals the history of the plant, the way that the Shire folk tended it, and it is like of the tobacco family. He talks about that. It is of the nicotine tobacco plant. It is not cannabis. Flatly, it's not cannabis. However, you do find in
okay.
century,
you know what? I'll admit I'm wrong. I'll admit I'm wrong. Moving on, before we get to this momentous occasion, and I appreciate Italia for joining us, staying up very, very late, even later than Jim, because this is a momentous occasion. But before we start celebrating the first days of recording the Lord of the Rings score, we got some news and updates from the Lord of the Rings set this week. The new rumor is our friends at Fellowship of Fans seem to have confirmed that they've identified the third director to join Amazon's billion-dollar Lord of the Rings series. He will be doing the last 2 episodes of the series of the first season, and he flew into New Zealand in February and is in the middle of production. So we've got 3 directors now confirmed. Well, not confirmed, because Amazon doesn't ever confirm anything. So we got 3 directors working on Lord of the Rings, and of course they're under the showrunners.
Let's look at how many directors they had circulating on The Mandalorian. And we got to meet them.
Well,
all
we got
that extra.
We're going to dive into the directors in a future episode. The other big news this week is that
maybe it will get up to that number. I'm saying maybe we might get more directors.
We're going to get many more directors.
Yeah.
And Amazon, if you're listening, just call Viggo Mortensen and give him season 2. Just give Viggo Mortensen the entire directorial job of season 2. The other big news is that
I agree.
Amazon was developing a video game, an MMO, a free-to-play video game based around Lord of the Rings and their license.
It met an unfortunate end, didn't it?
It did get canceled this week by Amazon because the Chinese developer of the game was acquired by Tencent, which is a big, huge Chinese conglomerate, and Amazon didn't like that. And so supposedly Amazon has canceled the game. We've got the contract. I don't know if you can see that here. I've got the contract between Amazon and Leiyu Technologies right here. So I'm going through it to see what rights they had, who had the rights to kill this. So we're gonna have a deeper dive on the OneRing.net pretty soon. This says, let me focus here. Confidential, says Amazon on it. So all these rumors and allegations on the internet, we just want to set the record straight. But anyway, the reason the hashtag in the corner says LOTR 20 is that everybody is celebrating the 20th anniversary of Fellowship of the Ring, released in 2001, 20 years ago this year, and we've got a year's worth of amazing reunions and celebrations, and we were just getting started last year, and here we are. And this weekend, Doug Adams and Jim Ware tweeted a reminder that this is the week that the very first notes were recorded. Were recorded with an orchestra, and we need to talk about this. We need to go deep into this. So guys, like, why was he recording in New Zealand and not London like most films were?
Well, this was the very first thing they did, and this was actually in preparation for the 2001 Cannes Festival presentation, the preview that kind of set tongues wagging, I think, shortly thereafter. And they wanted to get some music ready for this presentation. And the presentation would include, if people don't recall or haven't heard before, it included the majority of the Moria sequence, although I think it ended right before the arrival of the Balrog. And then it included sort of some clips from all over the film. I think even some momentous stuff like Frodo saying "The ring is mine" and things like that. And then that was all underscored with a sort of early version of the breaking of the fellowship. So it was the entire Moria sequence is still what we hear today. That ended up being, they didn't re-edit the sequence or anything. So it's still in the film as the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra. There's a few little plugs here and there where the London Philharmonic fills in a few passages. But it's essentially still their performance, including the beautiful soprano solo by Mabel Fatalu, which is the soprano we hear, her wonderful voice when Gandalf falls in Moria. And that's all still in there. The Breaking the Fellowship, the composition was reworked because they hadn't yet really done the final edit of that. It was sort of a preview edit designed to work in with these other clips from all over the trilogy. So that was eventually re-recorded in a slightly different structure. Howard reworked that composition a bit. But anyways, that's this. The whole production was down in New Zealand at the time. Peter was still very much working on the edit, and a lot of work still going on. So that was kind of the logical place to hold these sessions. I think there was some consideration of recording the entire score down there. I think logistically it was just too difficult to pull off. Although it did, of course, come to pass with Hobbit scores, those last 2 Hobbit scores. But yeah, that was how everything ended up down in New Zealand. It was very much a New Zealand production. It was kind of like, well, let's do it here and see what happens. And I think simply due to the technicalities of the production, things got moved to London for the remainder of those recording sessions. But it was kind of cool. They hired, like I said, Mabel Fatalu was the soprano that they hired down there. No, she was in New Zealand. Yeah, all that music. Take note, and Mabel, yeah, well, the Mabel part is easy. Fatalu is Faletou. I apologize, I'm butchering that, but it's something along those lines.
I always remember the name of Mabel. It's easy to remember Mabel Tolkien. I always remember her name immediately. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the association I make.
And she has a name that she uses professionally now, probably because of, unfortunately, silly people like me that struggle. Oh. She's credited with, yeah.
She's in the Breath of Life sequence. That's where Aragorn has the sort of vision of Arwen when he washes up at the side of the river. Yep. Call it the horse kiss if you like.
Yeah. That's a great dichotomy there, like the difference between British language and American language. Jim has a lovely description for it. We call it the horse kiss.
Yeah, sorry, I had my mic muted.
Yeah, she's credited with all that. She's sorry, Justin's referring to the horse kiss. But she's on the album and credited where she appears, so that stuff is all in there. She did a beautiful performance. That was not, of course, part of. For those that didn't
hear me, I was just mentioning that Ken in the chat room was asking where did Sheila Chandra participate in the Two Towers soundtrack, and Jim answered that. When Aragorn gets kissed by the thing. But let's start at the beginning, because we're on Torn Tuesday here in 2021. So 20 years ago today would be the second day in the recording sessions.
Yeah, I think so. We actually have some of the recording logs are available in the music of the Lord of the Rings films.
Yeah. So today would actually have been the 4th day. So it was the last day, the 20th.
Yeah.
But 4 days from the 17th to the 20th.
What do you mean the last day?
Well, they had a relatively short.
The last day in New Zealand.
Okay, this is new information. Can expand on that, Jim?
So let's backtrack a bit anyway. It's important to remember at this point that Howard Shore had already been on the film for close to 2 years at this point. Mm-hmm. So he visited the set several times during production. Production was still ongoing at this time, sort of in early 2001, sort of March and April. Peter Jackson was still shooting stuff while Howard Shore was recording at Wellington Town Hall. And as Doug said earlier, this whole early recording was purely to get the Minds of Moria sequence down for the Cannes Film Festival, which is very unusual. It's very unusual. I don't think there's any. I can't think of any other examples like this.
It could be similar to the. They don't do it very often these days, but sometimes trailers will use a bit of the original score. You hear a preview of what the theme will be when you actually hear the movie. So it was kind of like
sometimes.
That. Yeah, not very often these days, and not even very often in the heyday of film music. But I think this was like that on a larger scale, but also meant to sort of, this is the point at which this was such a huge investment for New Line. They needed to sort of, on a very large platform, prove that this was a worthwhile investment, not only for the coming winter, but for the 3 winters, that these would be.
And the New Zealand winter is a summer. Before we go,
absolutely. May I also add, please, that they could not do a temp score. They absolutely had to record that fresh material to make the strongest impression for the Cannes piece. Did they not? Absolutely. Remembering that the earliest teaser trailer had borrowed material from Requiem for a Dream, right?
Two Towers had that. Yes, right.
Oh, that's right. For Two Towers had that. So obviously, I can understand from a production position why they would want to invest in having absolutely brand new music that represents what the audience is going to feel and see and experience while they're there.
Hey, Cliff. I think we take our audience for granted sometimes, and we spent 24 hours over Christmas break watching Lord of the Rings with these guys, but we didn't do a formal introduction. And people in the chat room are like, "What is the book called?" Cliff, can you introduce the book?
I think I did already, but I'd be more than glad to say that this is, the book we're talking about is the music of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Is that the correct title, Mr. Doug Adams?
The music of the Lord of the Rings films. Yeah.
Films.
Yeah, it's a tricky name.
It is in its 6th printing.
Extraordinary. In its 6th printing. Yes, it is. It is the music of the Lord of the Rings films. And if you want to know everything there is to know, this is the book. It is a must-own volume. It's an excellent companion piece for any fan of these extraordinary films, especially if you're a fan of the music and the way it made you feel and the way it still makes you feel. You'll understand the source of everything better after this wonderful book. And we are very much graced again to have both of you gentlemen join us today, and welcome back again to Torn Tuesday, guys.
And before we
go on, Justin. Go on.
And before we go any further, we have a clip of Howard Shore and Peter Jackson in the studio on that first day. Let's take a look.
Film, and he is totally devoted to somehow give the music a cultural significance.
A section of the Encyclopedia of Moria, just to give you some idea of this particular world that we're trying to create. Moria, it's in the year 1697, the second age of the sun.
So that
why is he telling the orchestra the history of Moria? How does that influence a performer?
I think they were getting on to the description that Howard often would give the orchestra, which really came from Pete, which was that the Moria thing, the entire thing was like, the voices from hell sequence, very dark and grim and fiery and upsetting and all that sort of thing. But, Howard, part of the reason that I think he came onto this project is he was so good with literary adaptations. He really liked to get into the world of these things and the structures of these things. These New Zealand recording sessions, and I think his attempt to clarify for the musicians and for the audience of exactly how this music related to the story, I think it was partially responsible for him asking me to be a part of this. Jim had to remind me of the date of these recording sessions. I will fully admit I did not remember off the top of my head that we were coming up with an anniversary, but I did remember that the anniversary of me being asked to participate was May 16th of that year. So it would have been shortly after Howard had returned home, and I think that would have been shortly before the Cannes preview. Is that right, Jim? What were the dates of the Cannes preview?
The Cannes preview, they were in Cannes May 14th through 20th, I believe.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
I don't think Howard was over there the whole time. I'm pretty sure he and I spoke about a different project on the 16th of May, and that's the point at which he asked, would you be interested in being involved with all this? So this was kind of like, this was my catch-up period where they had to explain everything that had just happened a few weeks before in New Zealand. And then from there on, I was always kind of a part of what was going on at that time. But yeah, I think he wanted them to understand where that fit in terms of storytelling. And that is important to an ensemble, to understand, what you're trying to convey. I think Howard really likes to get into the detail. You probably could tell the orchestra, this is a very intense, fast-paced sequence with a lot of danger, and they would sort of understand in a very general narrative sense of what they needed to do. But Howard loves those details. He loves that world-building aspect of these things. So I think that's something he wanted to relate to them.
We have we have another. Go ahead, Cliff.
May I ask? Does he always or offer the translations from David Sallow of what some of the choral texts are, so that the instrument players actually understand
I think Howard's duel is a little rusty, so I think he probably leaves that to
okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But just the translations
gives them a sense of what they're saying. Generally, the choral section, actually, that is something that was unique about the New Zealand thing, is it was one of the few times that the chorus and orchestra were sometimes recording together. They did a bit of that in the UK, but primarily they record those things separately, just for the logistics, and then of course for the freedom of doing things in the mix as well.
So let's talk a little bit about the chorus for Moria, because that's what they recorded first. We have another clip. Let's play that.
Okay.
Mines being a dwarven kingdom would really suit having sort of male voices, a bit like a Welsh mining choir.
And they're singing in this ancient dwarvish language.
So these 60 guys, chanting these dwarvish verses. And then I augmented it at the end with actual football players.
They were looking for some grunty voices, and they thought that a Kapahaka flavor would fit in with it.
We're trying not to get copyrighted.
Yeah. Can't give away the grunty voices. Yeah.
But you know what? As soon as you cut the sound, Justin, everybody, even the audience, even myself, we heard the music in our ears.
My Kuzdul is probably worse than Howard's, but I can tell you what they are singing in the translation.
Yeah.
So they're singing, this is the English version, which was written originally by David Sallow. Deeper into the earth, the dark grows heavy, cold snaps our bones. Deeper into the earth, there the glint of Mithril, sharp and far away. Deeper into the earth, that sound again, dread surrounds us. Can no one hear us? A great shadow moves in the dark. The earth shakes, cracks, splits. Will no one save us? Fire, fire in the deep, flames lick our skin. Fear rips our heart. No, 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 the demon comes. And that no, 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 the translation there I can give you is the loo, 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 that you'll hear the low, grunty voices as they describe themselves, chanting that loo, 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 no, 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 no.
Wow.
It's sort of the departed dwarves, I suppose, singing, the ghosts of Moria, as it were.
So we've got a clip playing, no audio. This is the animatic that the musicians would be playing to. This is the edited scene without all the visual effects, but it's for the timing. The question from the chat room, Kim has a great question, and maybe Jim, you have an idea of: do musicians get to watch the scene as they are playing?
It usually depends on the session. I mean, in some cases, the film will be projected behind them. They might be able to sneak a glimpse of it. A lot of the time now, because studios are very, very spoiler conscious, only the conductor will see the film.
Sometimes the orchestra would be, like Jim says, facing opposite the screen. Occasionally, the percussionist would have to wander behind the screen. This is before the days of digital screen, when things were actually projected. So a lot of them would have recollections of these movies, but everything would be backward. So they would sort of see the inversion, from behind the screen. Jim and I watched an entire performance, I think, of the last act of Fellowship in that manner, which is very distressing. Yeah, it's kind of nauseating. Nothing's where you expect it to be. But no, generally only the conductor sees. I mean, the people in the booth would see, but in terms of the people on the recording floor, the conductor sees it. They will have like a monitor near them where they can see it close up, and then sort of the bigger image behind the orchestra. If, as Jim says, they are still doing that. Although a lot of times they don't do that these days, especially with everyone having cell phones. But no, the performers don't usually see it. They have to watch. I mean, they should be watching the conductor anyway, like a good musician. We all have to yell, watch the conductor. So.
Yeah.
The conductor's version of the film will also be annotated, typically with sort of bar and beat numbers and punches and streamers, which guide the tempo and cueing of various instruments.
Yeah, the Oracle system that we were just before the show started, we were talking about our friend Ludwig, who conducts many of these live performances, and I was doing some studio conducting as well, including a well-known upcoming film that we probably won't talk about yet. But they have to deal with all these various colors and shapes flying across the screen to keep everything synchronized. It's quite a trick. It used to be very confusing to classically trained conductors at first because it wasn't anything they're familiar with. You know, you're as a classically trained conductor, you're just getting up there and sort of expressing your inner voice. And this was something that was constraining, but also had different creative possibilities. And I think young conductors now are usually quite comfortable with it. But even as of 2008, when we started having the Lord of the Rings concerts live, people were really confused by this system. How do I line this up? And I can't really do whatever I want with the tempo. And yeah, film conductors have been dealing with these things since 1930s, late 1920s.
Alexander in the chat room reminds people that as musicians, they are watching the conductor, and so all eyes are on the conductor. They are there at the whims of the conductor. And
now they also in a recording session likely would have a click track and at least one headphone as well. So there is a little bit, because these film orchestras are mostly sight reading. They probably do watch the conductor. It's forgivable that they watch them a little bit less than another rendering of Beethoven's Seventh or what have you.
RJ McReady in the chat room says, "Wait, you guys are talking about your buddy Ludwig. Are you talking Ludwig Göransson of The Mandalorian?"
Ludwig Vicky. Yeah, he's Ludwig Vicky is the wonderful conductor who's done the vast majority of the Lord of the Rings live projection concerts. He's really the guy that started it all. The history books will one day trace a lot of this current praise live scores back to our friend Ludwig.
Yeah, I mean he's moved into conduct. He's moved into more studio conducting now. On top of that, as we said, he's about to conduct a major film that we won't talk about. He conducted the score for Howard Shore's Pieces of a Woman last year.
Yeah.
He's done a few things for Michael Giacchino.
The chat room says, you mentioned click track. Can you explain that? What is a click track and why would they have it in their ear?
Click track is essentially a metronome that is pumped into multiple headsets. Now, it's not strictly a metronome because many of these longer film compositions have tempo changes worked into them. They speed up and slow down and things like that. A strict metronome would just always hold the same beat for as long as you have it on. So this is made to follow the tempo changes in the piece. Even Ritardando or Rallentando or things like that, they will sort of program that in. Occasionally they'll cut it out and say like slow down here and then start in the new tempo here, things like that. But it's a way for, when these things are synchronized to film, they're synchronizing them to 1/128th of a second. So they have to be very, very, very precise. And if you usually don't see this in a professional film because people have done this very carefully, but if some of these recording sessions where they're still trying to get it down, and you're supposed to have the big cymbal crash on the reveal of Minas Tirith or whatever, if that thing is 0.2 of a second off, it causes great distress in one's mind. It's just that the audio-visual asynchronous quality of that is very upsetting. So these things have to be incredibly precise when they're recorded. so sometimes it helps film musicians. So again, our sight reading, this is a piece of music they've never seen before, because you don't really usually get things in advance of a film session. Sometimes it was finished at midnight the night before anyway. And they have to make sure that these things are very, very exact. So in addition to having the conductor, they will often have a click track. That's not always true. And there's some very famous examples of where they got rid of the click track. Everybody probably, if you're a film music nerd like us, you know the story of the end of E.T., where John Williams just couldn't quite get the music to sync up with the edit of Spielberg's film. And Spielberg said, just turn off the click track, turn off the movie, conduct it as you would, and I'll re-edit the film around it. And that's where the final edit of E.T. came from, was John Williams recording his score, and then they cut the film around it because it flowed more naturally that way. He trusted Williams' shaping of that material more than he trusted his own. So it can happen. There are some famous examples. There's other examples like that too, but that's one.
I love stories like that, and I'm a big film music nerd, big time. We could talk for endless nights about Elmer Bernstein, and then Leonard, and then we could talk about certainly the amazing contributions of Danny Elfman to Tim Burton's career, which I think is a great mirror to John Williams' contributions to Spielberg. There's such interesting couplings between filmmakers and their film composers. And I think that analogy also continues. I'm endlessly fascinated by Peter's relationship with Howard, and we can talk much more about that. Can you tell us some insights on that in general, as creative personalities? How did they get along?
Well, let me before you answer that, let me roll a clip of them getting along.
I love that. Let's
see here. Hold on.
Oh wait, it's not there yet. How anticlimactic.
Audio is not playing. Hold on.
Okay. Oh, that's because we're trying not to get slapped with it.
They wanted someone that would collaborate with them, that would be willing to invest the time to develop themes and to help us even in production.
Because more so than just scoring the film, I wanted the music to reflect Tolkien. I wanted the music to also bring the world of Middle-earth to life.
So Howard agreed to come down and meet with Peter.
And he visited the set. And he visited the set again a few months later, and he was just started to immerse himself in the world very, very quickly once he'd agreed to do the film.
You could see the depth of the creativity of what they were trying to create in New Zealand and the passion for it. And I think it was on that very first trip that I had decided that I definitely wanted to do the film. It seemed like a hugely daunting task to do 3 films.
Normally on movies, composers might work for 6 or 8 weeks, but Howard was with us from very early on in the shoot. So, you know, by the time The Fellowship of the Ring had been released, Howard had been on the film for nearly 2 years.
Tolkien spent 14 years writing Lord of the Rings, and you're now writing a musical image, creating the music, a musical mirror, if you will, to his writing. And I mentioned this so often, you know, even in other discussions about feeling like Frodo, and I really did feel like that I had this amazing journey to take, and I had the ring in my vest pocket, and you were chosen. Now you're going to write the music to Lord of the Rings, and you had to do it.
So we saw a brief glimpse of the sheet music where it's at Orchestra. Is that what you're talking about with a click track? Like, here's the beats we have to hit in the order we have to hit it, and there's an audible click 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 click.
Yeah. Jim, if I talk really quickly about what the conductor scores look like, do you happen to have an image there where they would have some of the click track, you know, the little sync points on top of the score that we could throw up?
Keep talking. Keep talking, and I will find you something.
Keep talking. Okay. So yeah, what you saw there were the scores that the conductor would, in this case Howard, would do his work from, which it has everybody's part. So the conductor needs to see what everybody is doing, from, you know, second oboe to the bass trombone to cellos. You have to see everything at once. And there you can see the numbers at the top of the pages. Those would be the measure numbers. These scores don't have any of the sort of punches at the top of them, but some of these scores, especially the ones that they would use for Lord of the Rings as the series went on, they would often include sort of a beat breakdown of sync points, you know, for synchronizing with the film. So it would say, you see the close up in the orc's face here. You hear the rumble of something's, you can only put a few words, but it would be like the rumble of the cave troll coming. Sword. It's little simple phrases so that on the second half of beat 2 of measure 493, I'm supposed to line this up with a sword. They're difficult things to do. You can't ever envy. There we go. Perfect. Yeah. So these are some of Howard's sketches you can see here. And if you look at the top, these are good. Just kind of what
this is his hand. This is the hand of Howard Shore.
That's Howard's handwriting. Yeah, exactly.
So the line at the top will show you various synchronization points.
St. Patrick's Day of 2001, it appears. This was
Yep.
written. And this is a very sort of sketchy breakdown. You can see there's little notes that aren't even fully complete on the right side there. If you look by Frodo Struggles, but he's kind of showing you sort of a harmonic breakdown and where some of the more melodic figures are happening. But if you could sort of, at the top there, you saw references to characters and all those X's, and that's where things line up. That's how it's synchronized.
Well, we've got on screen here in the fifth box, we got M88 Golem, 91 Balin's Tomb, Orc Attack. So these are the 3 scenes in a row. So and these would be multiple pages of music, right? Because M88, the M88 is basically when Frodo is speaking with Gandalf and they're lost, and he's like, "I wish it had never come to me." Correct?
Correct.
Yeah, correct. So
between some of that as well.
Yeah. So these are basically what we would call cues in film music terminology. So at this point in time, Howard Shore had already spotted the entire film with Peter Jackson. I think there were 140 cues across the entire film. And these are actually the 3 of the cues that were recorded on the first day that we can see here.
The chat room just wants to look at Howard Shore's writing for the rest of the show.
That would be
Howard actually
most welcome.
spent some of his younger musical years as a copyist, so he has incredibly beautiful music handwriting. His notation is really very, very nice looking. It's usually very chicken scratchy with most composers because you're just trying to get it on the paper as quickly as you can. But his is really quite elegant.
Do you have other score sheets like that? I'm fascinated.
We may have some laying around somewhere. I wouldn't know anything about that due to copyright issues. But you do see on the score pages that you have there, the M88 and you work. If there are any musicians in the audience listening, how we know that some instruments transpose. For example, if this is written for B flat clarinet, everything is written a whole step higher for the performer. The concert score is showing you the sounding pitch of everything. Howard know what he should be hearing.
Fun fact from the chat room, and I can verify this, when Howard Shore signs autographs, he often writes the notation of the Shire theme with his signature.
Sometimes, yeah. It depends on how long the line is.
Right.
We've held a few places open a bit longer than we should. At that point, we're just lucky to get our initials on the paper.
Kim wants to know, how long does it take to go from Howard penciling these themes to writing it into, making all the sheet music?
Well, Howard would. So there's another step in there. Howard would take these sketches, and then
what did you just show us, Jim?
Well, since we were talking about the Shire thing,
you want to put it up, and I'll give the process.
I'll put it up.
Okay, don't put it up too long.
Okay. Oh my.
So Jim has here. This is another sketch from Howard. This is the Golem sketch, and you can see it's really a melody line and harmonic underpinnings. Right? It's just very bare bones of what this piece will have. Howard would do all of his own orchestrations on the Lord of the Rings. So he would take this and then divide the parts up by hand. He would do it in pen for the entire orchestra. So he would figure out, what does the flute play? What does the oboe play? I believe the solo here eventually became, it was at times alto flute, at times English horn, crongle. those chords beneath became strings, but of course you have to decide, what does the viola play? What does the cello play? What does the bass play? And he would do that all himself, and they would have this massive handwritten score, and then that would go off to copyists, and the copyists would engrave everything using modern notation software to print it. It's like a word processor for music notation.
Oh,
and from that, the parts would be generated. These things were happening in the middle of the night. Yeah.
Okay, so forgive me
And then
because I am a
parts
total
sometimes
Luddite.
Howard would go. That's okay. That's okay.
So
You need to start over.
he pencils these things, and then he pens the full orchestration, and then he hands it off to
And
the
the full
copy,
orchestration,
and
the
then once
easier
you have
understand.
all these copies, someone figures out, oh, this is clarinets and this is cellos.
No, he's already figured that out. That's when Howard orchestrates. That's what the orchestration process is. What do the clarinets do? What do the violins do? What do the French horns do? So on and so forth. And really, the copyists are just creating the sheet music, the notes on the paper arranged cleanly so that an orchestra can sit down the next morning sometimes and perform it. And there are certainly considerations in there as well of, some of these things are 15, 16, 34 pages long, and to figure out how do you turn a page in a session without, your hands are occupied, you're playing. So they have to figure out those type of things. And
how long did it take the copyist to transcribe the music into the sheets that the musicians receive?
They had mere hours sometimes. On Lord of the Rings, it was often, this is more when they moved the production into England, but it was a 24-hour production cycle. Howard mostly kept New York hours. So he would compose until 2 or 3 in the morning, kind of like we're making poor Jim do right now. And then send everything up to New York. New York would sort of prepare parts and et cetera, have everything sent back to England where parts would be printed and would be on the stand for the musicians the next morning.
How many copyists are we talking about?
Oh, how big? It fluctuated. It was a fairly large team. I think Jill Streeter, who does a ton of copyist work for a lot of sessions in the UK, I think she was in charge of it and had a team that was sort of overseeing it. There were 2 or 3 people that were sort of the leads, and then a crew that was working with them. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and you can't let your attention down because the musicians need all those details in there in order to properly bring to life what Howard envisioned. It's a written language. It would be like giving someone a Shakespeare script where they left off words. You have to get everything in there.
Of course, but it has some of that process been modernized with music software, music notation software that might assist in that? Because I'm telling you, it sounds like the most grueling process to get through.
It does assist in terms of speed, and probably wear and tear. They would have gone through a lot more copyists if they didn't have computers, because they'd be getting tendinitis left and right.
Yes,
it does help with the speed, I think. Yeah, that's probably.
There's an example of this from The Hobbit on one of the documentaries where you see Conrad Pope, I think, dictating a change, and they had the copyist on standby to just type up and print out the parts there and then and hand them out. So
indeed.
Most
would still have pencils on their stands for last minute changes, as would Howard. If you see his final scores, the ones from the sessions, they're coded in red pencil. Changes made.
So backing up big picture. All right, so we've got Cannes coming up. Let's see. So Howard's been engaged for 18 months. We're at this week, April 20th. The week of April 20th, 2001, and he's recording for 4 days in New Zealand with an orchestra, composing and conducting, just to finish the Cannes Film Festival sequence, which is the entire Moria sequence.
Yeah. So they're also doing it with an orchestra that's never done a film score of this scale before. They're doing it in a venue which is not a recording venue, so they've also got to build a recording studio and all the infrastructure that goes with that, which means shipping in all the equipment, running all the cables, getting in all the engineers and everything else. So it's quite an undertaking just for 4 days.
they had to hire a number of soloists in addition to the vocalists. They had to hire some whistle players. I think they found Howard described him as a lovely surfer dude, I think, playing the whistle solo from the early version of the Breaking of the Fellowship.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And if you listen to the fan credits from the Fellowship Extended Edition, you can hear the early version of the Breaking of the Fellowship in there. It does appear. We considered putting it on the CD that comes with the book, but we figured it seemed a bit abusive because people already had paid to get that music one time with the extended edition of the film. So we didn't put it on the album because people had it clean. There's no dialogue over it, but you can hear that early performance. It's obviously the same piece in a different form. You can hear that relationship. But it's neat to hear how things began and how they changed into the final version.
So this shot from the appendices on the DVD, this is this New Zealand? Because it looks like just not a film recording studio.
Town hall.
That's Wellington.
Is that what you were talking about? And then did they return later to record more with the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra?
Not until The Hobbit. Lord of the Rings, the entirety of the next all of Fellowship and the next two full scores was done with the London Philharmonic in England. They did go to Watford Town Hall to sort of swap one town hall for another to create a sort of similar recording environment. Watford was a better setup for such things. They had their
I think it was immediately after, or may have been just before these sessions. I think Howard Shore was visiting Watford and other venues in London, just trying to find the right place.
Had he recorded at Watford before? I feel like he had done at least The Fly and Wood there.
I don't know. I need to check where The Fly was recorded.
I know it was London Philharmonic, of course, so I think it was Watford, but I think he'd used that room before, so he's familiar with it. But it was sort of, all modeled after the setup. And we have some of this a wonderful interview with John Kerlander, who was the recording engineer on all these scores in New Zealand and England alike, but discussing how the recording setup in England was really designed to mimic what they had recorded in New Zealand because I liked that sound.
So let's show a clip when they moved to London. After this clip is done, I want to know details like where they're at. Let's
during the closing credits of the film, Dreams it's called. She helped Howard direct the boys' choir. It was a London school choir with a wonderful young boy.
Edward Ross, he's probably about 12 years old. He represented the boys, and it was a boy soloist for the choir.
That song was recorded in the number 2 studio at Abbey Road, which is where the Beatles did all their recording. And as a huge Beatle fan, I was incredibly thrilled to be there, find myself there recording a song for our movie.
The boy soloist is 32 now. Anyone wants to feel old.
And guys, I am trying to track him down to be on Torn Tuesday because I really want to talk to him.
we would love to interview. Now, getting back to something I don't think that.
By the way, if you just 1 second, if you don't mind, if you look at the headphones they're wearing there, that is how they heard the click track, but we're still able to hear the rest of the performers. You have one headphone. Justin's sort of simulating that right now, but these actually are headphones that are built to do that. Yeah, we've all done that trick where you just slide one in the back of your head. But these headphones are made specifically for that purpose. So that's
indeed. I love that, and that's how it's all put together. The question that I don't think you had gotten to answer because we're moving along so swiftly with so many great aspects of this whole thing from 20 years ago. But I want to know, Doug, were you ever in the room and heard Howard say, okay, Peter really likes this? Was that kind of energy where Howard felt encouraged by Peter's reciprocation of energy and his acknowledgement of how, at what point did Howard actually say to you, I think we're onto something here? That's what I want to know.
Well, usually after each take or after every X number of takes, he would go into, the orchestra would take a little break, or the chorus would take a little break, and Howard would go into the booth and review some of the audio with Pete. And yeah, I mean, I think your job as a film composer is to make sure the director is content with what you're doing and happy about it. So I think if he got that thumbs up, that sign of approval, I think he was very, very happy with that. I think they all kind of felt it was a weird production. Usually if you're in these things, it's like the director's baby. He's envisioned this thing and been with this project for years and years and years. I think they all kind of felt that they were in the service of Tolkien with all of this. So they were trying to as sort of creative partners in bringing that world to life and honoring Tolkien's creation. So I think more than trying to get each other in that way, I think they were kind of trying to please his spirit, I think.
Did
I appreciate
Howard,
that.
Did Howard ever communicate to you why he chose to conduct? Because a lot of this type of work scoring, you have composed by, but not conducted. And these soundtracks are composed and conducted by Howard Shore. He didn't conduct really for the Hobbit trilogy, but it's not standard. Why was Howard insistent on, and did he ever communicate why he felt the need to conduct?
It was a bit more common in that era. It's become less common as time has gone by, but it was a little more common in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, even the 90s, I'd say. It is a more common thing. But Howard did have a very unique approach where he wanted to sort of be involved with all aspects of these things. His credits, even prior to Lord of the Rings, would often read composed, orchestrated, and conducted by Howard Shore, which I think the only other person I know that consistently had that was Morricone, would usually have the same credit.
Well, that's the big trifecta, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. There's a whole lot of work in those three words. Yeah.
It's very unusual.
He was
Certainly in the
very
film
dedicated to getting a very specific performance. He didn't just want a reading or a rendering of the music. He wanted a true performance. That one would go to an evening at the Symphony and feel that you had heard something not just laid out, but performed and acted. And I think he wanted to have his hands on that aspect.
So to that end, did he have any power to kind of say, this scene doesn't need music, I'm not going to record it?
Sorry, say again. I glitched there for a second.
Oh, did Howard have any power, because he was so involved, to say, this scene does not need music and I don't want to write and record it? Like,
and those kind of decisions are typically taken. Sorry, Doug. I think we may be saying the same thing. Those kind of decisions are typically made when the composer and the filmmaker sit down initially to spot the film, which is where they decide where music will stop and start. So by the time you're at the scoring stage, those decisions have already been made. Things may be removed further down the line, sort of in the final mix. But they're usually collaborative decisions made between the composer and the filmmakers. It's unusual for a composer to make that kind of decision on their own, I would say.
Did Howard know? I mean, special is kind of a weird word, right? Like, everyone knows Tolkien is special, but what made Howard want to put in all this effort? Was it because a studio was betting their whole financial situation on the line? Was it there's a lot of money on the line and I got to put my best foot forward? Was he a diehard Tolkien fan? Does he want to do right by Peter? Like, what was the main driver, do you think?
He was a fan of Tolkien as a young touring musician, but I think the thing that really turned him on to sign on the project is certainly nothing about like studios betting a lot on or anything like that. He was never really influenced, never to this day is influenced by sort of financial things like, this will be a big hit, my name will get out there and I'll sell a bunch of records. That's not sort of how he works. But I think when he had gone down to New Zealand, those early trips that you saw Pete talking about in those videos, there was so much pride and passion for what they were doing. To see, kind of the whole nation marshaled towards getting these films made. I think he found that incredibly moving. And, there's nothing more wonderful for a creative person than to be surrounded by enthusiasm, because that's when your best work will come out. He always said to me that after the first score, the first score won an Oscar for the score and for the song. And he said that, the orchestra, as always, total professionals, very warm and receptive. But after the Oscar win, that everything started getting so much attention from, people saying that these were sort of, masterpiece projects. He said they really kind of came to that second score with their heads held high and were very excited about it. And I think it probably went the first project was the little film that could, and everybody's throwing in, and it's very exciting. The second was, I think we have something here. This is going to be, people will be really pleased with these. And I think third was, we have a legacy project here. We have something that will be around forever. And I think that really lit a fire to get them to the finale.
Do you have any idea why he didn't conduct The Hobbit?
Logistics. He had to stay in New York simply for schedule. He did the first one. He conducted for Unexpected Journey. But for the second and third, that 24-hour cycle necessitated that he remain in New York composing the entire time. So he was composing kind of the next day's work while they were recording the previous day's work, and you can't be two places at once.
Yeah,
post-production is a dangerous thing.
It is. And Peter Jackson did not go to the London-based recording sessions for Unexpected Journey, which I think he found quite frustrating. And by moving everything to New Zealand, Peter Jackson's able to be hands-on at the sessions. And by having Howard Shore in New York, as Doug says, you have that 24-hour workflow where you can just keep things going around the clock.
Well, yeah. Jim, maybe you can answer this. Through this conversation, we've started to recognize just how many people need to be involved. I mean, you talked about, all of the copyists that work in 24 hours a day. We saw a clip where they had 60 male voices for the drums in the deep, football players that aren't even singers, and then we went to London for the boys choir, and there were like 40 people in that room. Plus, you had two symphonies, the New Zealand Symphony and the London Symphony. Is this why you don't see television doing full score music? Because it's just so many people, and that's what makes it expensive?
It does get tremendously expensive, but the way that it was done for The Lord of the Rings was particularly expensive, even by motion picture standards.
Yeah.
Just in terms of the amount of time allowed in the studio, the amount of time they paid for, the amount of musicians' time they paid for. I mean, they had in London, they had the full orchestra there every day, which is tremendously unusual. Sometimes you may have a larger ensemble, like an A orchestra, a smaller B orchestra, but full orchestra every day.
How many takes do they have on Fellowship of the Ring compared to your average, summer blockbuster film?
Let's look at a couple of large scores from 2001. So something like Alan Silvestri's The Mummy Returns, big 2-hour score, choir, also recorded at Watford for fact fans. That would have been done in about, say, 200 takes, maybe. Fellowship of the Ring, including all the soloists, all the choral stuff, is around 1,700 takes.
Are you kidding, Jim?
But, that also shows you how much attention to detail there was. This was treated like a classical recording.
It does.
So everything was finessed to the nth degree.
Really?
There was a lot of editing, a lot of very, very careful attention to detail just to make everything sound as good as it possibly could.
And we are the beneficiaries of that. 20 years later, we are very much the beneficiaries of that. That is stunning to think that the artists were so dedicated. And in fact, they had to do a certain acoustic restoration to the space in New Zealand before they could get it to the position.
Did he budget this in advance? Did he like who approved the
hold
budget?
on. It was Bob Shea.
Music executives are hardworking individuals. We'll just leave it at that.
Well, the idea was, as we all know, and has been recorded, that it was Bob Shea and the guys at New Line, Mike DeLuca and others, who got the foreign pre-sales in all the foreign markets, which gave them the production budget that allowed them to hire that many artisans and that many carpenters and have that many boots on the ground in New Zealand, and literally a full-scale orchestra, as you just so adroitly described. It's a huge distinction that it's not a small ensemble, that it's full orchestra they worked with the whole time. And what all that money that was in their pocket was because the promise of a legacy piece of filmmaking based on J.R.R. Tolkien, of all people, Lord of the Rings. That promise made the pre-sales so much they had enough money to afford to do it.
Credit should be given to the wonderful Paul Brusek as well, who was hugely supportive of Howard's process of getting the finest musicians in. He was the guy that I would call anytime I had a question of like, what car is supposed to drive me to Abbey Road. I think I didn't realize at the time how much this poor man had going on in his schedule, right? Tester, I'm like, what kind of car am I getting in?
Well, it starts it begs the question, if they budgeted the London Symphony Orchestra for a crazy amount of days, and then they only used New Zealand Symphony Orchestra for the Cannes preview because that was on an accelerated timeline, was the scoring session in New Zealand out of scope? Like, was it like, we got to do this and we got to do this now, and we can't use temp tracks and like get Howard to New Zealand, like let's get this going? Did that come out of a separate budget?
For the layman in our audience who don't understand that, that's an entertainment industry term. What is called out of scope means something that you have to pay for that you did not plan to pay for, basically, right? Yes.
I don't actually know when the idea of the Cannes preview. I don't know.
Oh, I think we're getting some internet stuff.
Yeah, I can't imagine that being unplanned. As Doug says, I don't know when the idea first came about for doing the Cannes preview, but clearly they felt that it was worth spending a lot of money on.
All right, it's throwdown time, and we're coming to the end of our conversation. Alexander wants to know real quick, favorite track from the entire trilogy. Jim.
Lighting of the Beacons.
Yes, sir.
Cliff, what's your answer?
I second that emotion, and I also want to acknowledge the folks in the live chat who say, let's give some acknowledgement to the hard work of the audio engineers who worked after the musicians were done. The audio mixers and engineers had a job to do too.
Yes.
And music editing as well. There's a lot of work once the musicians have their violins back in their cases.
Doug, favorite track, Doug.
Oh, man.
First thing that came to mind. Don't think about it.
Jim took mine.
We all agree it is the lighting of the beacons.
I don't know. It was just my cop out. I don't know.
No, it's it. That's got to be it.
It's hard. I can't every single time. Those scores are so much a part of my life. It really. I didn't create them, but it is picking a favorite child, and I have very specific memories of every one of those. It was. You always hear the story from the young actors who were in the fellowship, and how that was such a sort of weird time for them because it was entering adulthood and making this lifelong friendship and project and everything else. And I think that it sort of hit me at a similar time in my life where all of these things, like I know what part of my adulthood I was achieving during fellowship and Two Towers and Return of the King. And, you know, there's not a single composition in those films that I would be comfortable not having in my life.
All right.
That's
fair enough.
That's an even worse cop out than just saying I agree with Jim.
Jim, final question for Jim, and a great question from the chat here. Are the orchestra members paid for time? Like if they have to stay till 4 a.m., do they get overtime? Or what are the logistics of hiring an orchestra?
Don't call the union after you made them stay till 4 in the morning.
They will get overtime, and not all of quite a few of these sessions overran.
I think they have to agree to go into overtime, though. I think they have to take a poll among the musicians. Are we willing to work into overtime tonight?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I also agree. Go ahead, Jim. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the very first session overran on the first day.
Yes. Yes.
Matt,
I was going to back up what Arnie said in the chat, saying let's get Howard Shore to score the opening theme for the new TV series that's in production now.
Let's get him to score the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's do that. Let's do it.
Doug, do you have an update on that? Like, has there been any overtures from Amazon to Howard Shore's camp? Have you heard of anything?
As always, I feel most comfortable by simply quoting Howard Shore. Howard Shore has said publicly he would be interested in having a discussion about that. So, Amazon, if you're watching, you need the phone number. Please send me an email.
So if you guys, there was an article trending on Reddit last week that cited an article that was an interview with you in some capacity, Doug. You know, that like Howard Shore has been approached. We're setting the record straight. Howard Shore has only expressed interest, and there's no official contracts, overtures, conversations.
That's right.
There's
That's right.
wishful thinking.
I think in the interview in which he said that he would be interested, he also said he had not yet been approached in any manner. So
I tell you what, that in terms of Thirst Trap, the fans want more than they want anything, more than they want Richard Taylor and his team. They want Howard Shore to come back for this TV series. No, hey, I'm not casting shade at the extraordinary works of Sir Richard Taylor and Tanya, Roger, and all the people at Weta. But if we're being honest, being very intellectually honest here, the feedback we get on the live shows, and I do monitor what the fans are saying online, they want Howard Shore more than they want anything as a part of what makes them feel like they're going back to Middle Earth, going back to a familiar place. It's relevant to the music, really.
But would Howard Shore be able to adjust to the TV scoring method and timelines?
That is the critical question, indeed. And there's much more to observe and figure out.
Schedule on the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit movies, you can probably deal with it on these as well.
Imagine.
Look, the big thing holding Howard Shore back is budgets, and unfortunately for us and for everybody involved, Amazon is the richest company in the history of the world. Jeff Bezos is the richest man in the history of the world. He quit his job as CEO to run Amazon Studios and oversee Lord of the Rings. He is personally invested in this. He will spend
$465 million,
obscene amounts of money, which means that this has the potential of being the first television series to have the biggest orchestra and choral arrangements in television history, and
they can afford to get all those weird instruments that Howard likes to play around with. Yes. What do you think?
I think it's impossible to overestimate how much an impact music has on any of these projects. I mean, we live in an era where a lot of the things that we grew up with filmically are kind of coming back for a victory lap or whatever. And it's so important to bring back, if they're ready, willing, and able, the original composers, because I think that gets that indescribable sense of place more than anything else. And my goodness, if that's not important on a Tolkien property, I don't know what is. If it's important to Amazon to make this feel as if this is really part of these existing Tolkien interpretations, my goodness, I hope they get Howard on it, because I think the music is so indescribably important on these things.
It's interesting. We're getting, and someone did say this in the chat right now. Thank you, Scuba Steve. We get a lot more leaks and information about the new directors. You know, Charlotte, the new director is coming on, and we get a lot of other leaks of information, but we don't hear anything at all about composers or
it's too
what.
early.
I know, but come on, is it really too early? How long was Howard embedded on?
So.
Say that again, Doug, please. Yes.
Howard Shore was on The Fellowship of the Ring 2 years before it was in theaters.
Thank you.
A long time to envision. So,
tremendously unusual for that to happen in television.
Yes, it's unusual, but wouldn't it be helpful for the organic creation of the project to be in the mind of the composer while he's there on site watching it happen?
Already an unusual project, so yeah.
Well, yeah. All right, well, we'll see. We'll see what happens, and we'll report it here first, obviously.
Doug, Julia in the chat room wants to know: is there a chance that you can assemble all of the rarities and outtakes that have never been published to go along with your music of the Hobbit films?
Yeah, I think that would be quite possible. There's more of the Hobbit music out after the initial albums than there was with the initial albums of Lord of the Rings, but there's still some bits and bobs that people would have a lot of fun with.
Yeah, is there more than this?
Oh, there's the complete recordings.
Yes,
you have the initial releases.
Oh, these are the initial releases, but they're the leather-bound initial releases.
They are leather-bound. Yes, that's true. I don't want to be smart for leather-bound editions. Yes. But we did put out complete recordings, a little box set for each one of those, which I think are sadly once again out of print or out of stock.
This came with a little booklet. Did you write this booklet?
No. I think I might. Book. Yeah, just pictures. You ever even look at these guys and come on?
It's
just have that smelly paper.
This has all the lyrics. Does your book have all of the translated lyrics?
We do, yeah. They put a handful of them in those initial releases, and then we kind of got everything into the book. So I think here I can show you. We took sorry, my little notes all over. We took a similar style where we kind of present one language down one side and the translation down the other side.
Nice.
Yeah. So, I don't know that anyone's going to sing along at home, but you can sort of understand that there is more information being presented in these scenes than maybe just what you see. Sometimes the audio is giving a lot of information as well.
So I've got the soundtrack here. I'm looking at the back page. It's got a credits list. Are any of these people involved? Were they involved in the creative process, or are they just business people? We're talking Danny Bramson, Jason Chenkus.
There's a good collection. I think he was a record executive. I think he actually got me some of those early.
Paul Brusek.
Paul Brusek, yeah, absolutely, hugely important to the entire process. He was the music executive for.
He's in the Two Towers behind the scenes stuff, I believe.
He's in a lot of behind the scenes stuff, into the Hobbit scores as well.
Mitch Rotter.
I don't remember Mitch.
Lori Silfen.
Lori Silfen was a huge part of all this. I had a lot of contact with her. I think trying to get together my first trip to the recording sessions. She was an executive for New Line, I believe.
Mark Kaufman.
Mark, I didn't read. No.
Okay. Those are the names, and of course Peter Paul. Guys, this has been a wonderful look at the very first days of scoring. But before the London Symphony Orchestra, we were in New Zealand, and I have a very special announcement. While we're on the show today, I got an email from the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra. Next week on Torn Tuesday, we will have actual musicians that were in the room for this recording session on those first days. We're going to talk to musicians that were there. I want to this conversation today helped inform what I want to know about. I'm I want to know about those the copies and the papers, and what versions did they get? Did the tuba guy get the piano guy's notes and everything like that? So I don't know how it works, but Doug, Jim, you are invited. If you guys want to partake in next week's conversation, to talk with the musicians, and maybe we can all kumbaya and talk about those with the feeling in the room.
Sure. Yeah. Jim, what do you say?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, we'll stop by.
That would be great. It is always lovely to have both of you guys. And I want to add to Justin's sentiment. Obviously, it's really, really great to have you both join us again for this kind of conversation. It's so enlightening, and there's more insights I'm sure that we could share. We could probably create a very interesting TV show just around the lives of musicians who come and go in these music sessions and have to play Howard's music. It'd be an interesting show from their point of view to, how the orchestra members themselves put up with the direct pressures and the beautiful moments that they experience day by day. It'd be interesting. And what an insightful show. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. On behalf of everybody, thank you.
And before we go, program note for everybody watching. Today is 420, as we talked about at the top of the show. And coincidentally, we hit 100,000 followers on Instagram. Which is crazy. I wish I could monetize this stuff because a lot of influencers make a lot of money. But we're just fans doing this cool thing. So instead of us making money, we're going to give away some stuff. I found these 3 medallions. They are about 8 inches wide. I found them at the bottom of a box. Let me see if I can bring that up full screen.
Oh, delightful. Very good. We have a giveaway.
And you know what? To celebrate 100,000 followers on Instagram, we're going to do a giveaway.
Excellent.
So
Excellent.
These 3 random medallions. So stay tuned. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter because I got to figure out how I'm going to do the contest. But I told you I'd give away something special. And I supposedly these things go for like upwards of $1,000 on eBay. I don't know, but they're just sitting in the bottom of a box, and our history is now your reward. Thank you for following us. Thank you for the wondering. And you can follow Jim J. Ware on Twitter and Instagram, Jim J. Ware, and you can follow Doug Adams Music only on Twitter, I believe. Correct?
Yeah, I never got into Instagram. I think I'm too old.
I will post better pictures of what we're talking about on the socials, so don't you worry. But I appreciate everybody staying tuned. We've had so many new participants and viewers in the chat room. It's great to see a bunch of new people. And a lot of people asking, who are any of these people? Well, we get involved in our own community. I'm Justin. I'm the producer of Torn Tuesday. Been a longtime video producer, and we do this every Tuesday at 5 p.m. With your host Cliff Broadway.
Hello there. I'm Clifford Broadway, and in very short terms, I'm a 20-year contributor and volunteer writer and host for theonering.net. Just volunteering my time like we all do because we love J.R.R. Tolkien. And once upon a time, I actually wrote and produced a little documentary film called Ringers. We'll talk about that another day. And here we are every week. And along with the other postings we have on our social media channels and on our main website, where we have feature articles, we encourage you all to visit the forums. Come and visit our Hall of Poets and talk with the fans on our forums and realize that there's a lot of community and a lot of great conversation and really interesting conversations about, our anxieties and our shared excitement for the upcoming billion-dollar Amazon Studios television series. So thank you all for joining us on this communal journey. It's a mighty big ship. It's a big ship. And we're going to sail.
It was a big ship 20 years ago, and we're so pleased to have the support of author Doug Adams and his partner there, Jim J. Ware, who is the author of the music of the Lord of the Rings films, best-selling book on its 6th edition printing. It comes in and out of availability on Amazon at random because they can't print them fast enough. You guys keep buying them in hardcover, and it's just it's amazing. So congrats on all your success, Doug and
yes,
Jim.
Indeed.
And this is Torn Tuesday. Stay tuned next week at this time. We're going to be talking with musicians that played the first notes in Middle Earth. I'm excited.
Excitement. Hashtag excitement. This is going to be great. And again, thank you, Jim and Doug, for joining us. We're going to sign off. And to all of the Hobbit lads and lasses out there, be safe, take good care of yourselves. Until next week, we'll be back here 5 p.m. Pacific time on Torn Tuesday next week. Until then, good night and good luck, or perhaps buenos noches y buena suerte. See you soon.